Welcome everybody again to our Care Coordinator Info Share for July 2025. I'm Kara with SDS Training, and we also have our staff, Kat, our Care Coordinator Liaison, Damon with Training, and Cassandra also with SDS Training. We have some great guest speakers today to learn from. We have Jamie Lang and Mike Rowley. Jamie, I'll let you tell a little bit more about your background when I'm done my beginning here. And we'll learn about out-of-state placements today. And I'll go ahead and share, hopefully, be able to share our agenda and other materials that might be helpful as we go on throughout our presentation. All right, agenda. Let's see. Here it is. So as you can see, this is just our special guests from, of course, Jamie from Division of Behavioral Health, Mike from Springbrook Autism Behavioral Health, and we'll share our reminders with you after the session. I want to give enough time for folks to talk. And I think what I'll do now, if you're okay with it, Jamie and Mike, is to display the document that you wrote, referrals for out-of-state placement. Is that okay to start?
Yeah, that one is from me, Cara.
Okay.
So I can start, sure. I think Mike has a separate one, right, Mike?
Yeah, there's a separate one that's right behind that one, right in my queue here. But if you're
Okay.
good with it, we'll go for it.
Let's go for it. I'm good with it.
Awesome. Go ahead.
Okay. So I'm Jamie Lang with the Division of Behavioral Health, and my team oversees the out-of-state placements into PRTFs. And one of the things that this presentation is going to be on is how care coordinators can assist families in that difficult process. So first of all, it depends on the location of the child and how you can get that information. I think it's a little bit easier if the child is in a facility to get some of the information, but you can still get collaborative information for the referral packet. And the first thing that has to be done is that all in-state resources, meaning any facilities that could potentially help this child, have been exhausted. So we would need denials from those in-state providers in the packet. There needs to be at least 3 different in-state denials in that packet before we can even review the packet. The list, I have a list here that's I think that, will they get a copy of this too?
Yes.
So that they can click this list? Okay.
After the session.
Great. So there's a link here for the out-of-state placements, and those are all found on Comagine Health's website. Comagine reviews all of our out-of-state placements with their doctors and clinicians for the medical necessity piece. So not only do we need the providers in the state of Alaska to say that they cannot take this child to their facility, but we also need a third party that reviews the clinical documentation and says that the child meets the medical necessity review and that they are in a level of care for a PRTF. So the link that's there on the third bullet will show you a list of approximately 300 pages. And I just want you to know that the 300 pages is really deceiving because it has many pages for each provider. There's about 30-ish providers, but each provider has about 10 pages, and it tells you their exclusions and their inclusions. So you could get, if you're looking for an autistic child, you could look at very specific providers like Mike will talk about that take children with autism. So you wouldn't be looking for a facility that might take the child if they have just behavior problems. So that when you open that PDF, just be aware that it's gigantic. So what you can help for getting a child into an out-of-state placement is you can get the denials from the in-state providers. You can help the parents with that. We would need the current behaviors and the child's presentation from the last 30 days because that has to get put into Comagin's system. You can get their demographics and face sheet. So anything that says who's paying, because this is Medicaid dollars. So we need to know their Medicaid ID and all of their demographics. A psychiatric evaluation is not, it's really helpful because it's going to give a full picture of how that child is currently functioning. And then the psychosocial assessment should be in the psychiatric evaluation. And then a psychological evaluation is sometimes not available if a child has not been in a facility that's able to do that type of assessment. So a lot of times we would like to see a neuropsych that delves a little bit deeper into the child's issues. And that can come from if they've been in a hospital, sort of like an acute hospital setting. So once all of that information is available, you would send it, you would fax it to the Division of Behavioral Health. It goes into an electronic secure fax machine that can be then distributed amongst the team members to review. And we have an intradepartmental review process where we review the case together and then send it to Comagin Health so that they can make their final medical necessity determination. And if they approve the medical necessity review, they'll give a service authorization. And once that service authorization is given, then the child can start the transfer to that out-of-state placement. But one piece that gets a little, it's that this paragraph here where Comagin Health requires that a clinician with authorization have to add this information into the system. So this is the part that gets tricky because as a care coordinator, you will not have access to this. So you will have to be working with a provider that does have access to this. So a lot of times, if a provider out of state has interviewed and accepted the child, they will enter this information into Comagin's system. Then once we get I already talked about the interdepartmental review of the case, and then the child can start that process for moving out of state. And that includes the transportation piece. And most likely, because it's a child, there's going to need to be somebody that goes with the child. So they'll need an escort. And then the reference overall for inpatient psychiatric services for persons under 21 years of age falls under this section 47, the reference here. This reference is very specific because it's a law that says that children with Medicaid cannot be placed in an out-of-state placement unless all resources in the state of Alaska have been exhausted. So you wouldn't just help a parent because they said they don't want their child in Alaska anymore. They would have to prove that there is nobody that would be willing to work with that child in the state of Alaska. So that's one of the things that the resource team looks for, is that at least three denials come in saying that the providers in the state of Alaska cannot work with that child. So that's the PRTF referral process in a nutshell, and it's a lot more complicated once you start getting a referral packet together.
Thank you, Jamie. Are there questions or thoughts from our group? Any of my team see hands up or
I see a question. Like, what if an adult? No, this is only for under 21. Adults do not have PRT. Adults over 21 cannot go to a PRTF. One of the things also is that even though Medicaid may cover that child up to age 21, that doesn't mean the facility takes the child up to 21. And really, a lot of facilities don't take children after 18. I think it's that will also be in part of the inventory when you look at that really long URL that I have on there, because it will tell you what ages the providers take. No, an adult cannot go into a PRTF.
Sorry, this is Katie. I know they can't go into a PRTF. That's a pediatric psychiatric treatment facility, correct?
No, it's psychiatric residential treatment facility.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry. I should have put that. I don't know if I put that on the, yeah, I don't think I put that on there. Sorry if we're not explaining that.
No, it's all good. I just didn't know what the options were for adults in the same boat as the children.
There are the options for adults. It's gets really complicated. As most of you know that have adults. What usually happens is we can work together with the division. Well, it depends on who has custody. Sometimes the adult is still under the custody of FCS. And so if that's the case, there is a group that will come together and try to fit options together to help that adult in state and really work through additional wraparound services. And I think that most of you are probably sort of familiar with some of those wraparound services, but for adults, it can be really super hard. There is a big gap in some available services if they're really complex cases. But if you have a case like that, I would recommend that you reach out to you can reach out to me at the division, and I can help you navigate how to help with that individual. But out of state placement in general is actually prohibited in our state regulations for adults.
Thank you. This is Kara. For out-of-state placement for adults with the IDD waiver, your resource is going to be contacting Karina Castillo-Shepard with our IDD review unit as the first outreach, and also you can contact behavioral health as well. But
Yep.
it's a different process, yeah.
And so I forgot that we're dealing with this is the IDD world, and Karina and I work together really closely. So yes, go to Karina first, then Karina and I can figure out how to go from there.
But this is great to help us understand how it works.
Yeah,
and
it can be pretty complicated. It's a bit arduous, but it's also, I think part of that is because it's a law, so we have to really follow this to make sure we're not doing things illegally or outside of that law. Victoria has a question. Who can we contact if we have further questions? Or does the website have FAQs? I think it depends, Victoria, on what questions you have. The CoMagine website is going to be specific to the current Alaska Medicaid enrolled facilities out of state. It also has the in-state facilities as well. And then there's a whole entire section, a licensing section, that has lower levels of care. So sometimes if your kiddo is not at the PRTF level of care, they might be at a lower level of care. There's another licensing website that has all of the homes listed throughout the state. And many of you might be aware of PHH or RYC or any of those.
And so we've taught about the waiver and long-term care for people experiencing disabilities and the IDD waiver and things like that for years. We all probably understand that the waiver is a choice between facility care and community care. A long time ago, Alaska made a commitment to community care, and it closed its state-run facility for people with IDD, which is Harborview Developmental Center. And so if people are choosing to reside in treatment places out of state, it has to be places that work with Alaska Medicaid, and we have to go through these processes to make sure that there are no other options. And that is within our regulation, like Jamie said, by law. So nobody decides, hey, we're going to send this person out of state. Not any one person can say that. It has to be this whole process, which is hard, and it's for a reason. And we all know that there are the capacity and capabilities of our home and community-based providers need to grow as well. And those are all bigger questions and bigger, initiatives than what we could probably address here. But this helps because we need to understand this element of serving people who experience high needs for support in behavioral health diagnosis and manifestation of that, along with DD. How are schools and school districts involved for um, PRTF placements?
So most of the PRTFs have the school in the facility. We actually have lower levels of care that have schools in the facility in Alaska. So the education piece is required, so they still have to have education. Oh, the other one doesn't. That's Catherine's. I was looking at Susie's, but Susie's I don't think that is a specific question.
Yeah, it's a different
Yeah,
question.
The education can't be skipped over. And then how do school districts? You want to know school districts. So some facilities, this gets hard too. This is another tricky piece. Some facilities require payment separate from the daily rate that they get. And so the parents can work with the school district that their child is in to help with that payment. And that piece is I'm not very proficient on that piece. I usually have another helper with that I work with to work with the school districts to help with that piece. But it can be a bit difficult of a process, but the parents have to request that and really advocate for the child's allocation of money to get sent down to that facility.
They do. And that's because children with disabilities are guaranteed a free, appropriate public education in school. And the school is obligated to pay for that education if it cannot be provided in the person's home community, in their home school, and the state. So, yes, does the approval of that require a lot of work? Yes, it's a whole nother process with teams like this. But the essential law is IDEA. So every child has an education, and what I'm hearing, if I get it right, is it could be provided. A facility could provide that if they're qualified and have the resources, and then it could be provided by payment through the school district or the school that the child would have gone to, but they could not be served by. As a care coordinator, when should we bring in schools as part of this planning? Can the school's inability to provide free, appropriate public education be one of the denials?
I don't think so.
Good question.
And not all of the out-of-state providers require a separate amount of money for the daily rate for education. Only a couple of them do. So that's the good news. But if you pick one that has the education costs separated out, then we should let the school district know the day we're looking at sending the child out of state, really, so that they're aware.
Right. And it's really, I mean, care coordinators are tied to waivers strictly. Okay. So, like, I don't want to give the impression that, this is a required part of a care coordinator. When I see the question, when should we bring the schools in as part of this planning? It's okay to submit documents that you think will help. I mean, nothing says you shouldn't, but a care coordinator is tied to waiver services, and these are just things that could be in your zone to help if this is indeed the choice, the only thing that will help this child. So it's not really like in your zone of duty to manage the whole process. This is what you can know to help something that's already in progress, or give information to a parent who needs choices to make, something like that.
And on the referral form, it's going to ask on if the child has an IEP. So that's going to clue us into, especially if it's one of the facilities that requires that payment. So in the documentation gathering, you could gather on the IEP so that it's very clear, because it's easier if the child has an IEP, I think, in general, to work with the school districts. But we don't actually work with the individual school districts. We work with the Department of Education, which oversees all the school districts. So when we work these, we're going up to the top and getting that instead of individually, but we are going to need proof and documentation as well.
Great questions, everybody. So, okay, should we transition over to the autism brochure and you, Mike? Would that be okay?
Absolutely. If Jamie's done or that she doesn't have any other questions, I'm glad to be able to speak a little bit about Springbrook. I appreciate everybody's getting on today, and I think Jamie's the draw, and so I appreciate Jamie. Jamie and I have worked together for a number of years in trying to help kids get services, particularly on the spectrum. We've worked with Alaska probably for 8 or 9 years, I think. We are a program located down in South Carolina, and we treat kids all across the autism spectrum, high, moderate, and low functioning, starting at age 5 up to, we are one of those facilities that can go up to 21, but we rarely are admitting kids past 18. If we have kids that are really hard to place, the state of South Carolina will allow us to keep them as long as they're in someone's guardianship. They can't age out and then stay with us. They have to have a guardian. The last thing we want is a child or then would be young adult wandering around the streets of South Carolina because they checked themselves out. And so that's part of the key with that particular piece. But we, like I say, we have 91 beds dedicated to kids on the spectrum. Kids come from all over the country. Into the program, we work with high, moderate, and low functioning kids, and we'll divide them up by both age and functioning to meet their specific needs. We are firm believers in a multidisciplinary treatment team. We're not only going to have a specialized psychiatrist to help work with them, they're also going to have a master level therapist, which is pretty standard for a PRTF, and a rec therapist, which is also typically standard. But we also add in occupational therapy, speech therapy. We have BCBAs, which are behavior analysts. We have registered behavioral technicians working on the front line with our kids that are either licensed or are RBT trained. We have a special education component where we have our own school. And they're able, and we're able to do essentially treat all aspects of the child's life with that. So a lot of places that are treating them, they get focused on the ABA therapy, which is extremely important. Just in the research we did, we found that a lot of folks and a lot of kids needed additional support to the ABA, especially if they were going to come into a residential setting. Obviously, the kids that come to us, they're going to have aggression. Everyone asks, is aggression a disqualifier? It's actually a qualifier. We don't want kids coming out of their homes unless they absolutely need to come out of their homes. And so our program is really designed for kids that are unable to be maintained in the school system or in their homes, or in their local communities. So I can talk about how we divide those 91 beds out. 28 of those beds are an acute unit dedicated to, again, treating kids on the spectrum. Same type of thing, high, moderate, and low functioning kids, and split up into their different groups according to age. Again, the ages there are 5 to 18. And then work with the speech, OT, special ed, BCBA, the doctors, except this is not just a stabilization program. It is an assessment program as well. So we're going to be trying to stabilize behaviors to get them kind of past the acute level. But upon admission, we're going to have a pediatric neuropsychologist meet with them, do a true IQ so we can see exactly where they are, because so many kids on the spectrum, we don't have that for them. And so it's very important to know where they can function at, what they need. And then they'll start a series of tests. They'll meet, a lot of times special education will go next. And so we can see if there's any learning disabilities that they have attached to their autism as well. But we'll do a complete battery of testing for education. We'll go behind it with speech, and then occupational therapy. And a lot of times one test leads to another. We may end up doing 5 or 6 tests just in speech therapy to kind of peel the onion back to really get a good idea where the child's deficits are and how do we approach those therapeutically. So the behavior the BCBA, or the behavior analysis, will go ahead and write a behavior plan for the child to help deal with problematic behaviors. There'll be a nursing assessment, a recreational assessment as well. The psychiatrist will do a psychiatric assessment with kind of an idea of a look forward as to where are we going with these child's meds. Our average length of stay on that unit is around 30 days for higher functioning kids and around 60 days for lower functioning kids. But what we're trying to get with that is their meds started and trying to get them stabilized. A lot of times kids are coming in with medications, sometimes 3 medications that are all doing the same thing. And so we're going to taper some of those off and try to find the right balance on it. But it gives an opportunity, particularly if it's a pediatrician that may be doing their medications, to be able to call back to our doctor if needed and have a quick discussion on kind of where we were headed with medications if they discharge back into their home communities. So in the end, when they leave, they're going to leave with a 3-inch binder full of assessments with recommendations going forward. And that's really important for children on the spectrum because it's going to be very complete. It's important for anybody. Healthcare starts with assessment. And if there are kids that can wait a couple of years just to be assessed, to see if they do need speech, because you can't get it until you're assessed. I can sit and complain about knee pain or heart pain all day long, but until I get it assessed, no one's going to approve me seeing a specialist to get that treatment for it. And it's very similar with kids on the spectrum. You might clearly see they have sensory issues and need occupational therapy and need speech therapy, but you're not going to be able to get that for them until that assessment's done. So it clears those barriers for those kids and allows them to come back into the community. And they're going to work every day with speech therapy, OT, special ed, the BCBA. And so it's a very intense program where we're going to get them in. And at the end of that, we'll make a determination. Do they need continued out-of-home care? Or can they get back into their home community? About 60% of our kids will go back into the home community because it is intense enough. We're trying to connect them with resources, trying to get them another chance in their community after having this with giving the guidance to parents or guardians or therapeutic foster care, wherever they may be, on how they can help move forward with it. So they also will go home with the Functional Independent Skills Handbook. We call it the FISH. It is essentially a workbook for kids on the spectrum. It was designed by Dr. Bill Killian. This is used across the United States. Right now, he's working with Australia to digitize it, and they're going to use it for their system. Used in Europe and a lot of different places. But he was on our staff, helped us kind of put the program together. just retired, but it is essentially it's a workbook that we assess 400 areas of functioning, and it's just a yes or no. He designed it with the idea that there just aren't enough autism providers in our communities, and so it's just an assessment of behaviors. What do you see? What do you not see? And when it's all done, we put it into 8 categories, and so we can see the strengths and the weaknesses of the kids. All of our kids that come into our facility are going to score pretty low on behaviors. The average child is going to score 80-ish above on behaviors, or a child that can stay in a community. Most of ours are coming in between 0 and 20, and thus the need for that kind of care. But the great thing about it is not just tells us where their strengths and weaknesses are. Dr. Killian put together a workbook that is associated with it, that has a lesson plan for all 400 areas of functioning. It will tell you exactly what the objectives are, what you need, a step-by-step process on how this child can develop that skill. And there may be prerequisites to it. It may be that we need to teach our child to brush our teeth, but we need to step back and do a development of small motor skills first. And so you may have lessons around small motor skills that will help that child then eventually be able to handle a toothbrush and effectively brush their teeth. And so it's designed to kind of build on each other and help those behaviors move forward. So the kids will come home with the fish and the assessment sheets. In the acute unit, we do it upon admission, and then we also will redo it upon discharge, so you can see a comparison and see progress that's been made. So, I mean, in a nutshell, that is our acute unit. Again, it's 28 beds. A lot of people think that they're going to go to acute and then on to residential. I just want to stress again, only about 40% of those kids will go into our residential program. Our goal is to try to get them back in their community with these new resources, with some of the things they've learned, and give them another chance to be at home. Other times we just know that's not going to be possible, and we can see that we need longer term help with this child. And in that case, we have a 73-bed PRTF. Again, ages 5 to 21, don't typically admit after 18. But if we do have issues with discharge, as long as they're in guardianship, can stay. Very similar services. They're not quite as intense, where they might get speech therapy every day. Other kids may get speech therapy 2 to 3 times a week on the PRTF. They may get it in a group setting as opposed to an individual setting, depending on what their needs are. Similar with occupational therapy. They all work with BCBAs and have behavior plans written. And we train our staff to do those things. We're going to go on a longer course of medication management with them to try to get their meds really stable. And a lot of times kids that are struggling, that's a big piece of it for them, is their behaviors are still severe enough that they're not going to be able to go home and be successful. And so we want to be able to balance those medications out. Our doctors are very cautious about meds. There's just too many kids that come in with too many things. And they're going to slowly taper things down and also slowly build things up to make sure we're not being too aggressive with kids because of the harm that can do for those kids. So they do, again, participate in our special education in our school. We've had kids get GEDs. We've had kids make up a lot of credits in school because a lot of our kids are behind when they get to us. It's an individualized education plan. We have certified teachers, special ed teachers, and TAs that are helping them for the most part, particularly our moderate to high functioning kids. They are doing work with computers and getting essentially Carnegie credits so they can move forward and not fall behind while they're in treatment. For our lower functioning kids, they get this very same services. They're just going to get them in different ways. All of our units are similar but different. They're all going to have speech. They're all going to have OTs. They're all going to have BCBAs and RBTs that work with them. But for the kids that are going to be nonverbal or limited verbal, their length of stays tend to be a little bit longer. I have a storm rolling through here, so my power just blinked a little bit. So if I disappeared, I may not be able to get back on if my internet goes down. So I'll keep my fingers crossed. But they're going to deal with more communication skills, some social skills, small motor skills. We do a lot of what we call shoebox work with them, or centers. For those of you that have worked with young kids in an elementary school or have had young kids in an elementary school, it's not unusual for them to do centers. They'll go about 20 minutes at a time per center because that's where their attention span is. And that's very similar to the kids we work with and the teenagers we work with. And so they'll spend about 20 minutes at a center. And if they have some small motor skills issues, you may see them picking up pom-poms the size of a baseball out of a box and moving them into a hole where they have to put it directly in it. And hopefully within, a month or two, they're able to do that with smaller pom-poms and smaller until they can pinch them, or even do it with tweezers. Because if you can do that, there's a better chance you can have a chance to button your own shirt and help get yourself dressed, or use a toothbrush. We always say that Springbrook, we're not going to cure autism. Our goal is to improve quality of life for every family. And if you have a child that is low functioning and you have to, one of the examples I use, if you have to brush their teeth morning and night, and you're going to have to hold them down on the bed to do it, and they're going to melt down in front of it, and they're going to melt down after it. But all of a sudden that goes away. What a difference it is for that family. And for a child to be able to brush their own teeth with some supervision to make sure it gets done right, as opposed to the drastic measures that sometimes parents have to do, because going to the dentist is a lot worse than brushing teeth. So, but we're just trying to improve those skills. They're going to have communication cards if they're lower functioning, where they may not be able to form words, although we have a lot of kids that will speak their first words at Springbrook. But they can find ways to communicate. We're going to develop colors. We're going to develop, have them look at communication cards on things they need, things they can point to. We do not do a lot of technology. It's not that it's not valuable, and it's not that it's not important and can't be wonderful, wonderful tools for kids. But once we give it to them, it's hard to get it away from them. Our kids on the spectrum, just like normal teenagers, for all of you that have teenagers, if you go home tonight and take the kid's phone away, you're going to have problems with your child, whether they have autism or not. And it can be the very same with kids on the spectrum. And so we choose not to do that because we want to help them find alternative ways to communicate as well. So we do a lot of communication boards, communication cards. If it's in their IEP that they have assisted devices, we're going to probably try to work with the school district around that a little bit, with the idea that we're not trying to do away with it forever. We're just temporarily going to do something different with them to help that child learn and as they grow. So, but again, our higher functioning kids, if we can get through their sensory and some of their behavior problems, a lot of them are going to be able to go on and have full-time jobs. I ran into a mother the other day whose son had been through our program and is now a mechanic, and is able to hold a job and able to do those things. We have other kids that are always going to need assistance and care, but the more we can teach them to function independently, even if they're struggling with some communication and may have some lower IQs, but the more we can do that, the better quality of life they're going to have. And that's what Springbrook is about, is improving quality of life. We've had parents call us, say, I've just had a bike ride with my child I never thought I would have again. They were able to go to Chick-fil-A and they never thought they would do that again. Because honestly, at our cafeteria, it is one of our great treatment areas, because they have to go into the cafeteria 3 times a day. Every 15 minutes, we're going to rotate a group out. And so they're going to have movement in the cafeteria. They're going to have up to six choices. And so there's a lot of noise, a lot of movement, a lot of choosing. And so trying to help them deal with that in a controlled setting helps them to be able to go home and be able to go to a McDonald's or a fast food place or potentially a restaurant that they just weren't able to do before because it was just too much. And so we say that we do ABA from the time they wake up to the time they go to bed, just on trying to teach them different things and to cope. coping skills, and then communication. Obviously, we're going to be dealing with a lot of depression and anxiety with these kids, and so we're going to be discussing that with them as well as from a therapeutic standpoint and also from a pharmaceutical standpoint to try to get their meds right. So on the PRTF side of things, we have 5 different units. We have a children's unit, kind of a junior high and a high school, and then we have a low functioning unit and a moderate functioning unit. And then we subdivide those as well to try to meet their individual needs. We staff anywhere between a 1-to-1 to a 3-to-1 with our kids because they're going to need that type of attention. And they continue to have all those services throughout. We do treatment teams every 28 days. Obviously, we love having care coordinators in on those. Sometimes it's an early morning. We try to put Alaska at the end of it, which would still put you around 7:30 or 8 in the morning Alaska time. But those are some of the things we try to do to make it more manageable to attend those as we go through it. Gosh, I'm trying to think if there's anything else I could tell you. There's a brochure here that you can look through. Some of the things that would exclude a child from coming is if they are trauma first. Trauma behaviors are different than behaviors associated with the spectrum. And we're going to say it's not that we couldn't bring them in because they do have autism. We're going to say they need to go to a trauma program first, work through the trauma and see if those behaviors are still there, because they are drastically different, and very difficult to mix. And so with kids that are coming in to a program designed for kids, the behaviors are specifically related to the spectrum, to someone who's having a lot of lashing out, a lot of anger, a lot of sometimes violence associated with trauma. So that's one of our exclusionary criteria. If we can get them to a trauma program and we're still seeing behaviors, and we can clearly now start to delineate those with sensory and other things, we could bring them in from there. If they are having predatory sexual behaviors, that's another area in which we're going to be eliminating them from our group. It's not that it's not unusual for our kids to expose themselves. Not unusual for our kids to potentially masturbate in a day room or anything like that, particularly the lower functioning they get. And so we're not talking about those type of behaviors. We're talking about targeted behaviors, and what where they're looking for victims and they're doing some active grooming. And so if they have a history of that, it's probably also going to be exclusionary for us. And the third other big one is medical. If they're a child that ends up in the hospital every couple of months, we're gonna say that although we have 24-hour nursing and we have sick call that comes through every other day, we don't want to put a child at that kind of risk because we're not a strictly medical facility. We are working more with behaviors. So everything else in that gets into a little bit of a area where sometimes we might ask additional questions, might ask additional information. We're able to accept Alaska Medicaid, almost all major insurances.
This is Kara. We may have lost Mike.
I think we did. You heard all the thunder.
Yeah, it looked
All
like
the
a storm was
thunder.
going.
Yeah,
Was that thunder that I kept hearing?
it
Yes.
was. Yes.
Wow.
It's amazing, isn't it? Well, if he wants to jump in again and he can, that would be great. But I can see some questions. I appreciated a lot what he was saying. Um, it's obvious that they're working with people in custom ways. People will need certain services and some people won't. I like that he identified what's outside their scope. Um, and I think the biggest question was that wasn't answered yet is what help is there to offer transition back to the home?
So
Do you
one of
know?
the things, yeah, I do know a little bit. It's going to be based on the child's abilities when they come back. So one of the things that's required in a PRTF is that discharge planning starts on the very first day that they're admitted into the facility, because these are not long-term facilities. They're for treatment and then you get out. So they're going to start working on making sure that there's a good treatment options on the way back home. So they'll work with the providers that were currently working with the child in the state of Alaska and making sure that there's a safe discharge plan when they come home and getting them into the appropriate level of care. So some children that are maybe higher functioning, specifically on Mike's program, may have triggers that are in the home. So they might go into an assisted living home if they're 16 or above, so that those triggers aren't a complicating factor in staying in state. But each child is going to have their own specific discharge plan, and it's going to be very, very specific to that child. And they work with the clinicians at Springbrook and and they'll work with whoever the family's working with here in Alaska. And that's for all PRTFs. All of them do the same thing. And then on top of that, Comagine Health, who does our service authorizations, will also work with the clinician that's down there to help them locate services in the state of Alaska. So there are clinical experts basically for helping those out-of-state providers find the resources for the child if the child doesn't have resources, so that when they come home it's successful. And then Comagine also follows the family and the child for at least 60 days after they discharge to make sure that they kept their appointments, kept their medication management appointments, saw their therapist, were able to follow all of that treatment plan, discharging treatment plan, so that they don't go from a safe facility, then come home and then fail. We don't want to see that, because we don't want kids going in and out of state. We want them to go out short term if required, and then come back and be successful in state with their family. So I think that's a long explanation of how discharge planning, it's kind of like its own little specialty once they're in the facility.
Question, does that support happen on the front end to do prevention?
Well, the discharge planning starts on day one. So when a kid goes to a facility, we should be looking from day one. How is the kid coming home? Where is the kid going to go? What does the family need for support? All of that is going to be worked on from day one. And then Comagine works with the clinician every single 30 days. So that's also part of the law, is that we need to review how the child's doing every 30 days. So Comagine clinician calls the clinician out of state. They talk about that very specific kid and how they're doing and what the plan is for coming back, and what the out-of-state provider needs and what it's going to look like when the child comes back. So kind of, yes, day one. Yeah, the medically fragile children, Mike said that they're too risky. They have nursing, but they're not a medical facility. So I think it also depends on what the medical piece is. I think that a trach or a G tube is probably too risky.
Kara, are we able to, or Miss Jamie, are we able to put Mike's email address in the chat, so if the care coordinators have any other questions, that they'll be able to contact him?
I see it in there.
I did. I did it already.
I'm sorry, I didn't see it.
It's okay.
I put my best answer about transitioning and when does the care coordinator involved So for folks on the IDD waiver who go through these transitions through this very specific set of different activities that have to happen, not even on the part of the care coordinator, there is funding available through Karina Castillo Shepherd, and she's already involved, as we know, in this whole process for care coordination while the child is out of state. And so the specifics of what that looks like and what the care coordinator would be doing would come with that particular plan for that particular child through Karina in this collaboration with GBH. So that's been around for a while. It's not new. That's been a option. A list of providers and agencies that we would need to get denials from.
That's part of the referral packet, Sarah.
Yeah.
So it lists out all the providers that we would need denials from. Lists out the PRTFs and the PRTFs in state and the residential child care facilities in state.
I tried to open that big list that was in your bullet point, and for whatever reason, it's blocked from my machine.
Okay.
Like this SDS is blocking it, and I
Okay.
couldn't figure out how to open it. It's okay. It blocks random things, even state sites. So
Yeah. I was gonna, if anybody wanted to see what that fish book was that Mike was talking about, I can put that into the chat.
That'd be cool.
It's a really cool book. It goes through like the simplest things. Can they put on a t-shirt or take off a t-shirt? Like it, and then he was talking about at the beginning they do that assessment with that book, and then there, I just put it, Kim, it's above there. I don't think you're going to be able to see what's in the book. But it is super cool. It assesses the child from the smallest tasks to the most difficult tasks. And then they do it at the beginning and at discharge.
Great.
And really quickly, Mike had sent an email saying he will be back in Alaska in October, and he's going to start doing lunch.
Oh, cool.
So, and he said to share his contact information, so I put his number and the email address. But he's going to be doing lunch and learns around the state, so I think that would be also a good opportunity to maybe catch him.
Yeah, if you're curious.
He becomes full lives as well. But before
full lives.
Like in October, he said he'll be around. I know he talked to, I think, Stone Sue about maybe doing something with them for a lunch and learn. So I think we'll see some more information from him soon. But you could reach out to him directly.
Great.
And we'll
send it to you. Yeah, we don't have.
I know sometimes it doesn't work well in here, but I'll grab before we end. I'll grab all the links that you have here, Jamie, and we could include that in the.
Yeah, we'll email them to you. Sometimes if we put in attachments, they are, some of us have browsers and devices that can pick them up, and some of us we can't. So don't worry, we'll email it to you. All right. Well, it's about 3 minutes till the top of the hour here. Thank you, Jamie, and to Mike as well for this wonderful session. I really learned a lot. And we're hoping to provide some clarification around these procedures and different options that people may have, and what the eligibility for it looks like. So it's really great. I think that we've worked to clarify some of the assumptions that people generally have about these processes. And I really want to thank you all for attending and being here, and especially our care coordinator community for what you do for people we serve. We'll go ahead and close the session, and I'll stop recording.